who have joined us already in sharing this time of your day with us. This is Focus on Liberia. The program you are watching is called Prime Time Sunday. This is when we sit down with fellow Liberians, some experts or people who have interest in a particular topic. If it is differences on the issue, then we can share them. But today we are having a conversation on the name change for Liberia's capital, Monrovia. There are many people who believe that that name should be changed because the capital city of Monrovia was, or if you like, is named in honor of President James Monroe, who was a slave owner. And with the death of George Law, that enacted a movement trying to topple even statues of former slave owners. People are saying Liberia should not be an exception because having the individuals representing the name of our city speaks to the fact that we don't understand why our people went through slavery. People agree was evil, and in any form once tried to honor a slave owner would not be something good to do. So the people are divided, whereas other people are saying, well, Ni has nothing to do with Monrovia or anything. A name is just a name. It has no bearing on the reality of that particular person or thing. So the last time we have a group that supports the idea that the name Monrovia should be changed to something other than Monrovia because that name Monrovia is not a better representation of who we are as Africans. Our forefathers were enslaved, and so someone who took part in that slavery, his name should not be on our capital, and many other things. But today we have James Larsah, and we also have, I believe, Percy, who believe that that is not necessary to change the name. I will turn control over to my man Dennis Jai for further introduction. Dennis.
Gentlemen, welcome to Focus on Liberia. I want to welcome all our viewers across the globe. This is Focus on Liberia Primetime Sunday. We are delighted to have Mr. James Larsah, former chairman of ULABO and former TLA member during the days when we were at war. Mr. Larsah, welcome to Focus on Liberia.
Thank you, Dennis. I'm happy to be here.
Thank you. Good. Want to also welcome joining us for the first time on Focus on Liberia, Mr. Percy Harris, who's joining us from the state of Delaware. Percy, welcome to Focus on Liberia.
Thank you, Mr. Jai. Thank you for the invite. Glad to be here.
As my colleague already stated, Monrovia, the name Monrovia is the name of our nation's capital. Our history book tells us that Monrovia was founded April 25, 1822. That's the time the ex-slaves arrived on the shores of what we know today as Liberia. Before they arrived, people lived in that area. Some believe that these were the Mamba Bassa people who called the area Drukbo. The Pella people call it Duko, and the Southeasterners call it Trubo. That was the name. That name was first changed to Christopolis, meaning the city of Christ, when the ex-slaves arrived. Later, it was changed to Monrovia, named after America's fifth president, James Monroe, who, according to history, was instrumental in organizing people to repatriate Africans back to the soil. That's what we know today as Liberia. So the argument has been we should go back to that original name, Duko, or something that will reflect our cultural heritage, and remove the name of someone who participated in the inhumane treatment of our people, James Monroe. Some say not so fast. We should maintain the name Monrovia, and so we have Mr. James Larsah and Percy Harris who will be making the case tonight. Percy, let me start with you a little bit about yourself to introduce yourself to my audience.
My name is Percy Harris. I'm a Liberian who's interested in unearthing new information concerning Liberia and where we are and how to formulate policy by understanding what I obtained before and how we can formulate meaningful policies to address what's happening in the country in terms of socio-economic disparity, just on a broader scale.
Thank you, Percy. Mr. Larsah, a little bit about Mr. James, not Larsah.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Dennis. By the way, I'm James Larsah by profession, and I am an energy professional, long time activist for many decades ago, who is ardently interested in having a voice in matters affecting our poor people in Liberia. Not only that I was born and bred in Monrovia, I certainly have always, as far as my consciousness can go, been interested in matters of public interest affecting the Liberian people, and as in this case, the inhabitants of Monrovia, as well as in the diaspora. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's start like this. Let me start with Percy. Just give us a little background on the history of Monrovia and why you think the name Monrovia should remain as is.
Well, I come to this from a point of not mere passion, right? From a point where we can discuss Liberia within the context of international politics, because I mean, what obtained in Liberia did not happen in isolation from where we are today in the United States. So Liberia is not just an coincidence. Liberia is an American idea, so to speak. Last night I even detested the fact that people even refer to Liberia as America's stepchild. Liberia is not America's stepchild. Liberia is America's only child because she was birthed here. Her ideas were the ideas of American political, social, and religious leaders. So, and the idea of Liberia were even discussed in some of the most pioneering higher institutions here, like Princeton, like in Princeton University here now in Jersey. So these were some of the bedrock where the idea of Liberia were discussed. Now, when it comes to the name change, when I listen to the proponents of the name change, when they talk about changing the name of Liberia, they try to relate it to what is actually happening in the United States. In the wake of George Floyd and the systemic racism that have pervaded this country for centuries and centuries, and the unfair treatment that that were meted out against Black here. But you have to take this with a more nuanced approach, right? So let's not mistake what is happening here. People are against racism, right? The kind of statues that are being torn down here are not the statue of men like Thomas Jefferson, George Washington, Abraham Lincoln, and all these great Americans that came before. The people that have been torn down here are the likes of Robert E. Lee, right? Jefferson Davis. Those are the guys that represented the Confederate here. Those are the guys that fought to keep Black people as property. So these are the people that are being torn down here. It was not just mere slave owner, right? You got slave owner, you got other people that fought towards manumission and making the system better, but then you have other people on the other end that actually fought to preserve the hideous process that was obtaining in the South. So those are the people are mad that are going. If you look around, nobody's defacing the Jefferson Memorial, nobody's defacing the Washington Memorial, nobody's defacing the Lincoln Memorial. Nobody's doing that because those memorials stands in direct contrast to what the South stood for, right? Jefferson owned slave, but nobody's honoring Jefferson. Nobody's honoring Jefferson, the slave owner. We are honoring Jefferson, the statesman, right? Washington owned slave. Nobody's honoring Washington, the slave owner. Honor Washington, the statesman. That's what we're doing. That's what we did. And the same is with Monrovia, right? Nobody's honoring James Monroe, the slave owner. What we are honoring Monroe, the statesman, the president, the head of an administration, who administration worked tirelessly, right, to create and secure taxpayer money, American taxpayer money. And that's what I say, Liberia is not America's stepchild. Liberia is America's only child because it was American taxpayer money that funded the creation of what we now know as Liberia. So given the historicity of all these things that I just went through, right? We need to disabuse ourselves from what is obtaining in America in the light of, in the wake of George Floyd's death versus what the settlers were naming their country or their capital city or the settlement after. So we have to distinguish those two things. I'll
Okay.
stop for now.
Let me go to James. James, what is in a name? Like in the case Monrovia, and why is it important that we should keep or not keep the name Monrovia?
Yeah, thank you, Dennis. First, again, let me extend thanks to you and Sony and the rest of the others who are in support of this program. I'm trying to say you are a shining star, and so I want to encourage you to continue to do that. So we're providing a platform for the kind of healthy debate we can have here, as opposed to what is normally obtaining on Facebook and other social media platforms where there is no organized way of debating and no way to hold anybody accountable for any views expressed. So I have to say that before continuing. Now, the argument has been mushrooming recently from a very small quarter of individuals who are clamoring for the change of the name of the city of Monrovia, which from the onset, any rational person would think that this is something that one should be listening to, but when you become a part of the discussion, you quickly find that there is no organized effort for their advocacy. There's no kind of documentation or any tangible, organized reference point where you can go to engage them. You just come and do snippets on Facebook, and when you corner them, or when it seems like they are cornered, and then they disappear. So my argument has been that or such an effort would be considered lazy, tiring, and boring. And if at any point they were serious enough to advocate for what would otherwise be a very, very grand and solemn undertaking, they will redefine their approach so that we can have a way forward. I think while they haven't done that, you certainly have helped them, in my view, to provide this platform so that we can come in a kind of organized environment and confine ourselves to the discussion in an intelligent manner. So then the question is, what is in a name? The name Monrovia or any other name, I think is pride, is self-identity, recognition of what one stands for or what one wishes to be known for. Which is why the question is important to be asked as to why do you want a name changed? Now, in all fairness to the opposing side, they did appear prior to us, so we do have the benefit of having listened to them. Even at that, the argument is not diminished in any way. It remains tangible, and we have a viewpoint to present, a counter viewpoint, so that as long as they pursue that, we will hold them accountable so that they can convince us as a way of trying to win us. So I said, no, they are wrong. Their advocacy is wrong. It's not only wrong, it is not only wrong, it is also flawed. And it's not backed by any reasonable support. Now, why do I say that? Because like my colleague just said, that was a very great point you made, Percy, by the way. Monrovia is not a Confederate. Moro is not a Confederate name, or Monrovia is not a Confederate name. James Monroe was not part of the Confederate Army fighting to sustain and perpetuate slavery. And the city was not named Monrovia because Monrovia was a slave trading point or a human trafficking center. None. On the contrary, Monrovia was named, like my colleague just said, in honor of a very distinguished man, a man of high moral character, as I read about him, an American leader who was passionate about making an impact in terms of bringing in an end to slavery. That's why he's being honored. And he did a lot. So why do I say that? That there is no sense in the argument they are making, because James Monroe fought against slavery, even as he himself was slave owner. He fought against it. He evolved. Now, the question is, how can 2, 3, or 4 persons rise up today in July 2020 to say, oh no, we have to remove the name because the name is insulting, it was wrong, he was a slave. Now, if the man was an evil man, was a slave master, who should know better about that than those who actually lived in America along with him, his contemporaries who lived with him, ran away and came here, and they chose to praise him and to acknowledge him and to show appreciation. How can we claim to know better about the good of this man than those who did that? So then the question, Dennis, is to conclude, is whether Liberians appear to be having a false sense of grievance that is not justified. Why do you change the name? It's controversial. The advocacy is controversial and is without context, because if they had done it with context, they would want to understand, explore, and understand, to appreciate why that was done.
Thank you.
And it is also a distraction from other very important things that we should be doing as a nation and people. Thank you, Dennis.
Thank you. Mr. Cialola, you want to come in?
I really want to come in.
Go.
James.
Yeah.
I am glad you acknowledge that James had involved, talking about James Monroe, has involved, that he was a slave owner. At some point, he was practicing slavery. He was part of it. That was evil. And so he changed his mind. And in your explanation, you said he had to even abolish slavery. So what I'm coming to is people are wanting change now because to honor a man be, uh, who practiced slavery and put his name on a city for a group of people who suffer for so long, honor a practice he having to be a part of. I think that goes far above the appreciation of him helping to end slavery later on. I don't think his name should be associated with the city of Monrovia that is intended or was intended for free black people. And the reason is because he was part of the problem. He could have been appreciated in some other way than putting his name, because that name Maroon, you can't take away his history of enslaving people. And the group we have here argue that having that will bring back memories of the evil that he helped to perpetuate on our fellow citizens back then. What would be your defense?
So thank you, Anthony. Thank you, Anthony. A great question. I know it's a difficult one, but it's a great one. And I have to begin by saying then, what is the reference point? What is the compass? What is the moral compass? Who should be the one to be honored and is set a name after? Who should be that person? Should that person be a saint, a perfect human being? Should that person be Jesus Christ? Maybe that's why Monrovia was called Christopolis, probably, if that is the reasoning. Because then it's named after somebody who was perfect. But that is only one person. Who else do you know that has a name upon an object or place that is perfect? There is none. There is none. Even the great Martin Luther King, that we know with all the great accolades to his credit for the cause of fighting for civil rights, he himself had huge deficits, especially when it comes to morality. And many people see it as even one that was doubly impacting, because he was a man of God, a minister. And he was said to be quite on record to be a man falling short morally in terms of his immense womanizing adventure. But you have a monument here, one of the monuments, or many of the monuments, which these very advocates will insist that should be honored. But here is a man who was not only a womanizer, but who was also preaching every day on the pulpit that was in a way diametrically opposed to what he was saying. Hypocrisy, not only being immoral. So now, to the benefit of Martin Luther King, may peace be to his soul, he was a human being. So too is James Monroe. But there is a background to this. James Monroe didn't only evolve. We know that by the time Monrovia was being named, it had only been a quarter century, just about between 25, 30 years after the great insurrection in Haiti, where the Black people revolted. They didn't only revolt, man. They revolted in the most extreme way, and they murdered, they massacred their slave masters. So this is why in Haiti, in the whole world, Haiti is the only country where Black people have monuments to such astronomical extent. Everywhere you go in Haiti, there is a monument for a Black general who killed a white general, a Spanish general. Now, that to me is the main reason. There are other ancillary reasons, but that is the main reason why those in America and other places decided to put into slavery. But in addition to that, after they were frightened that the slaves in America will likely copy what happened in Haiti and do the same thing to them, because then the Black man had proven that he was strong. He was not just a slave. He had the means to put up resistance and to fight and to win. Haiti did that. Haiti won. Haiti is the oldest Black country in the world. You understand? So that did inspire fear. But in addition to that, there were also men of moral courage, of moral conscience, mostly found in the arena of the churches, the Christianity, who thought that it was not right to keep a fellow man a slave. So the motivations were many. Some of them, it was because, other reasons, because there was this issue of the North and the South in America, the clash, and there were those advocating for free slaves. And also there were those who felt that the slaves should be freed and sent home because they didn't think Black men should live among white people together. So there were various motivations. James Monroe is in one of the categories.
Thank you, James.
I think Percy wanted to respond to that question too. So Percy, if you want to, or I can ask mine.
Yeah, you can ask a question.
All right. And Mr. Larsah, Robin is saying here, you're really comparing MLK's shortcoming to someone who owns human beings like property. Seriously, James? You're talking about womanizing and dehumanizing of other slavery. That's Robin's question.
Yeah, thank you, Dennis. The answer to Robin, I think that's a very great question also, and one has to be candid and careful in responding to that, because we want to avoid false equivalency here, and so I will be guided by that. However, if Robin were to be challenged to tell us her or his own standard of what they think a man or woman should be in terms of their moral standing in order to be honored by naming a city after them, then maybe that can be a good beginning. But sure, if they are going to have the right to say that somebody should not be honored because they were bad, because they were immoral, they were bad.
We're talking about slave owner, not bad. I don't want you to kind of diminish it. She's saying someone who dehumanized other human beings who own slaves. It's not just bad or immoral.
Good. Which is what I'm saying is it still comes to being moral. It's not moral to own another human being. It's also not moral to be preaching the gospel and also be womanizing. I'm just saying that they are not equivalent, but it makes a sense that then is a need for us to come to a consensus as to what should be the threshold for honoring a man in such a manner. What is the threshold? What is it? So then the question to you, Dennis, and to that person is, who then should know the extent? Because then it becomes the question of which one is worse. We have two bad things. There's a worse than that. Okay, then if we agree that granted that is the situation, then who should answer the question? Is it those who are living here some near the under 200 years ago that will feel the pain of the bad things that Monroe did, rather than those who were his contemporaries, who instead saw that he did something that was in their favor and that was good, and honor him? Who should know that? Now, here is it, Dennis. This could be equated to a desire on the part of advocates who are pushing for the change of the name of Monrovia City, a desire to purify their history, to filter their difficult memory, so that they don't remember that Liberia had a history before, that they had free men, ex-slaves who were there, that America supported. That James Monroe was part of an effort that a bill was passed in the United States Congress for way back about 200 years ago for an amount of $125,000 to support the new foundation. It was to them that the Freeport was built free of charge at a cost of $22 million. You understand? And you can go on. And then it was costing $50 to free a slave and get him into Liberia. He also contributed to that, even though much of that money came from the church, the Christian community. Some of that came from people like James Monroe, which is why I believe the people chose to give him the honor and the credit.
Thank you. Let's look at the other side here, and I want Percy to respond to that. That not only was James Monroe owned slave, and the reason people gave that someone who owned your parent or owned you as slave, you can turn around, honor them, is what people famously refer to as the Stockholm Syndrome. I don't want to go to that, but my question to Percy is, besides that slave aspect, Monrovia had a name that was changed to Monrovia. So what's wrong with going back to that old name? Especially if the people who live there, who you met there, that's the name they call it. So something to reflect themselves, their culture.
Yeah, so to that point, right? And to that point, I would say that there's the beginning of most nations, if not all, every nation, most nation is not pretty, right? So there was a war of attrition from the beginning. There was a war of attrition. I tend to think about it this way: what had the native wiped out, managed to wipe out all the settlers from Duza Island when they were fighting? I mean, what would we be saying here today, right? We would still be saying the name would have been Dugo, whatever we wanted to. Probably nobody would be here to argue. Nobody will be here to argue for the settlers, right? For whether they were contributors to what is now the country, or what are now we're even going to have Liberia. But unfortunately, we have this situation where there was a war fought, right? Somebody won, and the people that won actually got the rights to name the place that became their dwelling at the end of the day. So it's hard to take away that fact, right? That these guys fought for the right to be in the place that they were too at the end of the day. So I'm given the fact that they did that and they fought gallantly and won a place for they and their children. I mean, obviously they give them the right to name the place. So I mean, that's all I can say.
Okay. So that name, and because of that early fight that you talk about, that the start of everything, a country is not pretty. So there were wars fought. If we remember when the coup of 1980 came, it was to avenge that in a way, because it's one group of people who have dominated for over 100 years. So they were going to overthrow them. So they overthrew them and changed the constitution from being we the people of Liberia originating from the United States, and changed the constitution in their view to reflect everybody instead of just a small portion. Fast forward to 89, a war came to revenge that. So if we don't sit back now and say, okay, how do we solve this problem instead of having, one war and counter war, how do we come together and kind of resolve this? One of this is in the name. What do we do?
Well, places. I mean, in other progressive society, what they have done, right? I think, and that was the trajectory that was started in the 80s, and with the rewrite of the Constitution, with the rescinding of Pioneers Day, Martyr Newport days, and all those days, right? That's what the beginning. Nobody complained when Martyr Newport was removed because that was foolishness that was actually handed down to other Liberians about her stuff in the war, right? There's just no evidence to her exploit in that war. There's just absolutely no evidence in the fact that we even need something like that for Martyr Newport. So nobody complained about that. Those were actual issues that we can all sit down and reasonable people can look at the facts for what they are and say, yeah, that's foolishness. Let's get away with it. Pioneer Day, who's Pioneer? My people were here before your people came and met them here. So who's the Pioneer? So, so those are reasonable arguments to be made, a reasonable conversation to be had, right? But when it comes to a place like Monrovia, right, and the historic city surrounding it, right, that's a whole nother issue, right? Because imagine me going to Bopolu today and say Saboso sold slaves. So we should change this place name from honoring him or anywhere that honors Saboso. We should change the name, right? And name it to something just because Saboso sold slave. Well, to the settlers, Saboso was a good man besides being a slave trader. He was a very good man. He helped them secure that land at the end of the day. Wow. So Saboso is a good person. I will argue for the naming of streets and everything after him because he did good deeds. Everything about him wasn't bad, right? The same as for James Monroe. Monroe was
Percy, before you go that far, the South Boso and Bopulu. What are you saying? That Bopulu is named after South Boso? Or
no. I'm saying that's South Boso country, right? That's South Boso's town. It's almost like me telling you I'm going to South Boso almost like me arguing that. I'm telling you, we should change Bopolu name because it's Saboso country and is highly aligned with everything Saboso. We should change the name from Bopolu to something else because Saboso, the name Bopolu were where people were actually called the person who was the chief there, sold slave, and all that moral argument, right? And we should change the name. I can imagine what people will be saying to me, right? At the end of the day about changing that name. So that's what I'm saying. The same with Monroe. Yeah, Monroe. Nobody taking that away. Monroe was a slaveholder, right? Today we name places in our country after despots. You go to Tottenberg, right? You have we name installations after despots. Samuel Doe Sports Complex. But we're not name Samuel Doe Sports Complex because Doe was a despot. That's why that's the point I'm trying to make. A person can be bad, but they can also do some good in the public life. Doe was a public figure. He was a sports patron, and for that, we name or installation in other places after the guy. So are we to argue today because Doe brought the coup and Doe did this, he did that, and bring up all those dirty laundry? Who are we, right? And that's moral argument. The point I'm trying to make is the guys that are advocating for this name change, they are making moral argument. The issue of slavery, when they talk about it from a moral vantage point, right? They don't talk about it from a policy perspective, and that's where I try to see this thing from. Slavery was more than just morality. It was a policy issue that the founding fathers of this country actually wrestled with, right? They were thinking about it. You see it in the writings, you see it in the policy. For example, Jefferson wanted a colony far away from it. The colonization's effort in Liberia did not just start in 1822. Jefferson was engaging the Portuguese to send people to the colony in Brazil, which they refused. He tried Colombia. He tried. So these were things that they were wrestling with. It was not easy, right? It was not an easy thing. They were wrestling with, trying to craft policy. So Liberia is the result of that wrestling, right? It's a testament to trying to solve a complicated or complex policy issue. That's what it was. And you have to look at it beyond morality.
Mr. Harris, Dennis, let me jump in here.
Yeah, but I wanted to add, but come here soon. I wanted to add to that, but come here soon.
Yeah, gentlemen, I think you guys are trying to make this thing a little more complex and try to make it
it is complex. It's not a simple
as
issue.
well. Hold on. I'm coming with my question, Mr. Harris. Let me remind you that I can't imagine of any other evil on the face of the earth or on this
Mhm.
planet than slavery. How long it took, the dehumanization, the raping. Anybody who practiced slavery at the time, that person behavior sanctioned that evil that was perpetrated many years ago. The black community around the world, especially here in America, black children are still traumatized because of that huge mistake of the past. I
Mhm.
am saying anything that will bring healing to the
Mhm.
black man,
Mhm.
we should honor that. Because if we do not name the city in honor of Jim Monroe, who is dead and gone, it will not make any good. But if we change that name and if we're going to make somebody to feel a sense of healing, and that's why people are demanding all around Europe today, just that sense of healing. They don't want to see that image because it's a reminder of the past. Why are you guys fighting this? And after all, we are talking about your country. Okay, the place was named Dudko by our forefathers, right? So why does not go to them? Are you saying that we shouldn't respect our forefathers who named the place Duko at the time? And that James Monroe, that you can argue that we should maintain, who was a slave
Well,
owner? Percy, come
well,
in.
well, the initiative, I'm not saying we shouldn't go back to our forefathers.
Yes.
Our forefathers too fought wars. They took land from other people, right? And whatever name they gave to that land is what we know it to be, right?
Mhm.
So who are we to go back and say the land that was taken by our forefathers and named the day belonged to those people? And I mean, our forefathers fought for the land they want, right? They got the land and they named it what they wanted to name it. That's it. That's what we know it to be, right? So these are war. You have to understand history. When there is a war of attrition, right? Somebody win, right? Somebody lost, right?
Yeah.
And then the winner always get to make the decisions at the end of the day. It's not perfect. It's not a fun argument to make. It's a very ugly argument to be making here. But at the end of the day, that's what the history books tells us, right? So the idea, right? The idea that if we really want to heal black people, if we really want to heal the black boys and girls in America and whatnot, then we shouldn't just look at where slavery in America is. We have to look at the supply side of slavery, right? You have to understand that it was an economic issue also. There was supply and there was demand. Slaves came from somewhere. So those people that sold those slaves, I mean, like I can give you an example. Sao Boso, right? I mean, get
Mhm.
other kings that were there. Matter of fact, when the settlers came, slavery was very active on in where is now Liberia today. People were still doing the trading. I tell you what, it'd be strange to know that the land that is Cape Montserrat was not the very first place that was negotiated for. There was a town called Jumbo Town, right? The king there, his name was Jack Ben, right? He actually gave these people land in what is now Grand Bassa. But the only exception that he gave was if you want to be here, you have to not bother with the slave trade. And imagine telling a group of people who have been in slavery, when you come here, you see whatever I'm doing here, selling your same kind back. You can't bother us. And so
Right.
because of that, that particular project was abandoned, and a new place was went to people went to look for a new place there, right? Which is now Cape Montserrat and that whole entire area. So my thing to you is this argument cannot be borders on morality, right? We have to look at it for what it is. Monroe was not just a slave holder; he was president, he was head of state here.
Right.
He committed taxpayer money here to that project
That,
that we have right now called Liberia. And a whole lot of argument, debates, and policy people went into into that effort to give that place what it is. And it was because of that effort. That's why I want people to understand. It was because of that effort. It was not because of what a man did to a house or how many slaves he had to a house. And it was because of his public service, what he did in terms of policy policy stuff to get to where Liberia is, right? That's why the name is Monrovia. So not because the man had slaves to a house. Who cares? Nobody was counting the
thank you.
guy's slaves.
Thank you, Harry. Two things. Uh, First, you made some conjecture that even the Mamba Basa people that named the place Duko, they might have acquired it from somewhere else, or they might have defeated other people to get that land. There's no history of that. So let us not go into speculations.
Well,
There
and
were
not
two,
speculations, right? I'm not speculating. I'm telling you, right?
yeah, let me
Before
finish.
there was these Baza people, the tribe that was split, there was
Yeah,
war. I'm telling you that.
yeah,
It's not
let me,
speculation. I read a book here.
yeah, no,
It's
I
not
read the same.
speculation.
I read those same books too because I've not seen
Yeah,
anywhere.
but what we can dismiss is that there were war of attrition before these
Right.
settlers came.
Let,
That
let me
our people were they were cohabiting together and everything was fine.
let me end so I can ask my question before I lose my train of thoughts. So the second thing is because there's always this notion that hey, the people here were practicing slavery before the settlers came, and the slavery that was practiced in that place prior to the coming of the settler was different from what these are from.
What was the difference? What was the difference?
Okay. People when they owe people, they use them to work on their farm, and after that work was over, they went back home. They were never dehumanized.
Yeah,
Okay?
but when you catch, but Mr. Ja, right? That was when before the transatlantic slave trade. That's what you're talking about. When the transatlantic slave trade took place, when you caught people and put them on the ship, what you thought they were any of? You think they were coming here to celebrate Christmas?
No, that's not what I'm saying. That's not what I'm saying.
Yeah, but what you're saying is it was the period before slavery, how the African conducted themselves among themselves. What were passed for slavery among themselves. But when we moved to the transatlantic slave trade, what actually begot the chattel slavery in America. That's what I'm telling to you. When an African king or African tribe catch another tribe and sell them or put them on slave ships and send them to the Americas, to the Caribbean and whatnot. You think they were sending what was the thought process? They were sending them to celebrate Christmas or to sing a happy ending? What you thought that, I mean, come on, let's face the fact.
No, Mr. Harris. I was trying to explain to you that there's a difference between the slavery that the African practiced, because Westerners who came and grabbed people and took them on the transatlantic slave trade, they always make the argument, oh, you were enslaving yourself before we came. And you know that's not the same.
Yeah.
Okay, this was different. So you asked for the difference, that's what I was explaining. But slavery, and you keep going to this moral argument, you say, well, you are making a moral argument because this person did this, the other people did it. That's the argument that I hear most of the time from slave masters, from colonial powers, who say, oh, the people are doing it to you. In fact, currently, the argument between the new immigrants and the old immigrants, or the African Americans and African immigrants, say, oh, these were the people who sold you. Those are the kind of arguments that we hear most of the time. I don't want to go deep into that because it's not the point. The point now is this guy is a slave. Two reasons they are given. Number one, this place had a name before you came and you changed it. And what you changed the name to, this was not something out of the blue. This was a deliberate effort to take away the culture of these people and implant yours. So now we have come to the point of understanding and realizing the purpose of this thing. It was deliberate. We want our name back.
Before the next guest come in, let me just say this to you. Imagine you I like to crystallize these things. Imagine you, Mr. John, for the length of time you've been in this country, right? Work hard, put in a lot of work, had your children here, they went to school and everything else, and then somebody at the end of the day tell them, say, you're not American. What would be your retort? You don't belong here. That land doesn't belong to you. What will you explicitly say to that person?
I don't know. What's your point?
My point to you is my point is that yes, the settlers went there, they met a place, they met people there, and why not? But they actually fought for the right to be there too. And eventually they won. And eventually the Nims place, they had a settlement there, the Nima settlement there, they built a country there. So at the end of the day, if we really want this reconciliation thing, I mean, there's other ways we can do this reconciliation, but to say name Monrovia because it was, I mean, if you make this argument, name the place Duquois because it was Duquois before, where it was Duquois before until I won the war.
All right. James.
Yeah. Sorry, man. For some reason, I had a technical problem. Sorry.
Yeah, we understand.
Correct.
The argument of renaming, not just Monrovia, but other names, and even our national symbol is nothing new. It did not come as a result of the George Floyd incident. This has always been there. In fact, President Thomas set up a committee headed by Deshu to change some of these names. The last commission was headed by Dr. Dunn to revisit these names and our national symbol. So this is nothing new, right? Now, do you think anything to be renamed whatsoever? Do you think these names should be revisited, these symbols, or is this James Monroe name that is so strong What's about the other renaming and revisiting that have always been in the making?
Yeah, thank you, Dennis. By the way, I got disconnected. I wanted to make a point concerning Bopolu. Bopolu is the name of that county is a Pele name. Bo mean the mountain in Pele. Polu mean behind. It's behind the hill. That's the name of that county, and that's more than absolute majority Pele. But
I have another meaning for that name too, but go ahead.
Correct. Well, that is it, Bopolu, because Jalalong and I have pictures of him. We sat together, we spoke better together, and everything. But I want to disagree with my my fellow panelists just slightly. I'm not sure if I got him right. At some point, it sounded like if somebody did bad and he also did good, there should be no question about whether he should be honored by naming a place. I would let it differ a little bit. And that's why you came in so rightfully, Dennis, when you spoke about the constitutional amendment, the new constitution, when Emerson and others decided to remove certain excerpts, such as the one talking about those of us who came from the United States and other things. Even though I wasn't there, the reason should be easily obvious, and that is that particular clause was discriminatory and it had to be removed. I don't really think that anybody who did good and did bad deserves to be honored in such history manner. It has to be such that the bad done must not outweigh the good, and the good done must outweigh the bad significantly. So on that, I will agree with Percy. Now, in terms of what names should be removed, I really think there is a need to change a whole host of monuments, remove them and make changes to some of the names, except for Monrovia, for example. And I'm open to supporting the idea of Monrovia name being changed, only if you can provide convincing reason. I don't see any, it's just lazy, no support for that. There's just no support. But say, for example, Tutman, in my view, there is no single person that can be responsible for the degradation, the decline, the decimation of our country, the institutional setup, the system in our country. There is no single person that can be credited for that. Then more credited for that than Tutman, which is why we don't need to honor him. We need to remove his birthday, November 28, November 29. That date must be removed. And we could go beyond that. Maybe, I don't know, but Tutman High, maybe we can investigate, but the holiday must be removed, for example, and others, many others.
James.
Monrovia or not Ashmont Street. Why you want to change Ashmont Street? So then the question Ansoni asked was, is it controversial? I think it brings more division. Then the question is, if you remove their name, to whom do you give it? What name do you put there? It is not true to say that before Monrovia became to be named as Monrovia, there was a singular name for which it was known. Like you said, I think the globals call it different name. I think Dugo,
Trouble.
and the Mapa people call it Chuba. Well, that's according to Emmanuel Bouya, former information minister, who has a unique knack for interest in history, Liberian history particularly. I heard him several times on the late Mamadi Diakite show, and he repeatedly said that in Monrovia, that place belonged to two key primary ethnic groups, the Basa and the Pele. The Basa people call, at that time he was giving a narrative about Duka Hotel, why Duka was named Duka, for example. He said, well, the Basa people call it Monrovia Duba, and the people call Monrovia Duka. And so those who were involved with the construction and erection of the Duka Hotel opted to go with the Pele name. And there is obvious reason for that. I don't believe the Pele people were in Monrovia when the Basa people were there. I think the language, the lingo of the Pele people simply prevailed because of their sheer numerical power. And so when they spread around, they were not speaking English and they were speaking Pele. Whatever they said, the majority, follow it, like the rest Pusava. in Firestone, the majority there working there were Pera people. And once the people in Firestone started calling the parboiled rice pusava, which in Pera means 30 cups of rice, because in Firestone, they used to pay the people every month. They used to give them ration, food ration every month. And in every month, on the average basis, there are 30 days. So then you give, for one day, you give 1 cup of rice to a family, to a household, 1 day, 1 cup of rice. So every month they give them 30 cups of rice, and so they call it pusava. From Firestone, because of the sheer numerical strength of the Pera people, it spread to Monrovia and throughout the entire country. So then Monrovia is certainly part of what is now known as the Pera lands, the entirety of the
James, where are you going with this?
Liberia. Correct.
If your
so I'm just saying,
people call it many names, like United States, other people call it Quibbly, other people call it Mleka. So what does that mean? So people can call stuff by different names, but the argument is the people that lived there before the settlers or the ex-slave arrived call it Duko or Dubo or Trubo. So why can we not go back to it? I want to see your response. I've not heard it.
Well, I said it will be controversial and divisive. So then the question, what name do you put there? Do we then agree that because of their sheer number, the Pera people should dominate and formally nationalize the concept that even the land originally belonged to the Bassa people, they call it Duko, but we should say no, it should carry a Pera name or a crew name or a global name. So to Ashmore Street or Lane Street or Macklin Street, you know, it's happening here today, Dennis, because of this whole trend, this new trend of protests and demonstration. You know, protests and demonstrations are simplistic. They are spontaneous. They don't require any depth of thinking or complexity. So anyone can get in the street, break down monuments without any justifiable reason. But it brings about division. So then the backlash is that some people have gone to break down the monument for Frederick Douglass, who is, without any questions, a legendary hero for Black people. So how can you go about breaking down a monument for Black people and the Freeman's monument that was, you know, I'm just seeing it. So it has brought about division. And,
Gentlemen, I want to introduce something else, and it is also about identity, the sense of feeling your identity. Is one of the points those who support the name change have made. But before I can come to that to ask my question, Mr. Harris talked about the settlers that came. They made contribution in establishing the country we have today as Liberia. And at the time they were making decisions, they made a decision at the time, or it was during their realm of power, that this name Monrovia was named. So he is arguing that why can't we honor that? You know, because I mean they went through the blunt of it. They came by and said that okay, this man made contributions, so we should keep that name. But here's the thing: others may say that if the settlers themselves who came, who went through the mosquitoes, some of them lost their family members, who provided leadership, if any of them name was used to name Monrovia, it would have been a different case. But they are naming Monrovia in honor of somebody who helped to enslave some of their relatives. That is not a good thing. But let me come to the identity thing now. People want to feel a sense of belonging. Jefferson was a white man, he has slaves, and this is Africa, this is Liberia. So why can't we give it a name that we can better relate to as Africans, as Liberians, other than the white man name? Is there anything bad for them to say or to ask for?
You have to go beyond just the color of the skin, right? Again, you have to look at the skin in terms of, you have to go, just because the man is white, it's not enough. That's not enough an argument because the white man name, or you know, that's not enough argument to change your place name. You have to go beyond just the person's color of the skin. You have to look at what their contribution were to the process, right? What did this person contribute? That's the thing. Right. Again, the fundamental question there is what did Monroe contribute to Liberia that made them to name us one of the oldest settlement in the country after him? What did he contribute? You know, so then you have to go back to look at the records, what they got contribute. Matter of fact, if it wasn't for his 100,000 that was secured from Congress, right, those people would not have shown up on the West African coast, because the idea of colonization, or whatever we call it that at that time, were not going to be, it was just going to remain a pipe dream, right? But that the Finlay were going to be passing around in New Jersey with it, and nobody was going to give him anything. But it was these guys who had the power structure to help make this dream a reality. It was Monroe, for example, whose administration argued in cabinet meetings, right, with John Quincy Adams, the Secretary of State, and these guys, right, arguing in cabinet meeting whether or not it was within the president's purview to even give the 100,000 to the colonization effort, right? So he did that. Yeah, it was within his purview. That money was seed money that led to the Elizabeth going down to Sherbrooke Island, eventually down the coast to where we have now Liberia. So it is the contribution. It's not just the guy color of his skin. Forget about I can't say forget about the fact that he was a slaveholder, because he was a slaveholder. But in that moment, what he was contributing, right, was very meaningful to what we have now. And that was gratitude. And for anybody, if anybody listening to this show, if you want to argue against people showing gratitude for somebody, right, which is an African virtue to be grateful. If you did something for somebody in Africa among our people, you're supposed to show gratitude. So if you're knocking the settlers for showing gratitude because the man's skin was white, then I don't understand where African come from.
Showing gratitude does not mean you need to bury your identity.
No, but they were not. How did they bury their identity by naming the place Monrovia?
Percy, and that is naming, or you say, go beyond the color of the skin. Giving names to African places after white or Western is not in a vacuum. There's an intent. There is a planned design. The reason Westerners left and went to Africa was to Christianize, number one, was to take away the culture and implant their culture. So this is not in a vacuum. But we have a caller here who has been on the line for 1 hour. So I want to bring in this caller even before we kind of go ahead. 1036, the last 4 digits of your number. Caller, your name and where you're calling from.
Dennis, how you doing? My name is Prince Williams, and I'm calling from Tennessee, the volunteer state.
Prince, I was not calling you. There's another column, 734-397-10.
Oh, my apologies.
Yeah, so you will come after this column.
Okay, my apologies.
Yes. The caller came in at a time we came,
okay,
so I break that. Yes. Okay, caller, your name and where you calling from. 1036, last 4 digits.
Thanks a lot. My name is Jay Galapa Howard, and I'm calling from Detroit, Michigan, in actually Canton, Michigan.
Jay Galapa Howard.
Into the conversation. Yes.
Yeah, go ahead, sir.
Basically,
all participants are muted, and they can unmute themselves.
Go ahead.
Flashback on our history, referencing this deep conversation. The issue here is not new. I recall back in July 26, 2008, Dr. Sakri Malapai brought about the same issue. The question remains, is why now? Is it because of George Floyd death that's escalating all of the conversations surrounding this?
It has always been there.
It's a question for the panelists.
And if that is your question, I can come in to say it's written in the Bible. There's time for everything. So maybe this is the time.
Do you want the panelists to respond to that? Maybe.
Mr. Galakba, are you done, Mr. Howard?
This is a conversation, Harris. Anybody can respond.
Okay, thank you. Let me bring in Prince, and then the panelists will respond. Prince William. Prince, you change your name.
Yes, thank you, Dennis. And yes. Yeah.
What? I said you changed your name on Facebook, but you still use Prince William. It's good.
Oh yeah, and it's incoherent and in solidarity with my support for the change of the name of Monrovia.
Okay.
Back to its original name, and I changed my name from Williams to my mother, my traditional name as well, because Williams were given to my parents based on patronage, and I want to honor my ancestors, so I changed my name back to my grandmother's family name is Klagini. Klagini is a global name. Kru global name. So that's why I cannot be asking for a change and then I'm not subjecting myself to the same yardstick. So Dennis, I thank you very much for all your panelists, and I want to thank you, gentlemen, for us having this discussion. I often say that we one of those who with the philosophy that stick and stone will break my bones, but words will do me no harm. So I believe in the idea that people can sit together and have a discussion to agree, either to agree or disagree. And in that process, nobody will go bleeding, nobody will go sharing blood, nobody will die, we won't have funeral. We can have the intellectual discussion. I'm one of those who are supporting the change of the name Monrovia back to its original name. And the reason I'm in favor of the change because I understand our history and where we come from as a nation. The birth of any nation is not a perfect and pretty sight. You can even compare it to that of the birth of a child. That child has to come up and be disconnected from the umbilical of the mother. That child has to be clean and washed and smell nice for the mother can embrace it or it can enter into the community. It's the same thing with the birth of a nation. It's not a pretty sight. If you look at the history of Liberia, Liberia was not the country we know it today. There was not the intent for it to be a country. They fought those who thought about it, who conceived this idea. There were two groups of people who conceived this idea. One who believed in the Negro nation, and one who believed in the separation of the Negro, the free white, the Negro from among the whites who consider themselves supreme, and that they cannot coexist with the Negroes who were free. And one of those people who had that philosophy or the ideology of non-coexistence was James Maroon. He was not only a slave owner, but he was a big supporter of the idea of white supremacy, that white cannot coexist with Negro, a free Negro of blacks. And that's how the American colonization came about. Through the process, Liberia and those who believe in the idea that black men can capable of governing, they maneuver all the landmine, all the conspiracy, all the things that were set in place to undermine that Liberia wouldn't have been the country it is today. They maneuver and through the process of ingenious thinking, we were able to be successful today and declare ourselves as an independent nation as it is today. And one of the process was that they played the politics. They went along with the game. Some you may say they played our funny father. The other stupid the game. I mean, what you say, foolishness the game, wisdom. They did all of that, and as a result, today we have a nation. Now, when you look at the argument that why should we change the name of James Maroon? We should change the name of James Liberia, Monrovia back to either Duquois or Christopolis or whatever it was named before, because it is a great contradiction for us to say that a nation, a Negro nation that was formed, the first African republic that was formed with the ideology that blacks are free and capable of governing themselves, and they are against the notion that any human being can be subjected to an inhumane treatment of slavery, degradation, and abuse. For us to and take our national capital and name it after an individual who perpetrated, who carried out, who did it just because he gave her a purse that his intention of giving that purse was not to be able to secure as a nation, but rather to be able to support this ideology of non-coexistence of blacks. James Maroon didn't want to live with black people in America. So he didn't care where black people were. He didn't care how much money you paid to dump them in what part of Africa he wanted to dump them. Our forefathers too needed money to be able to secure and the nation that we have today. So they compromised, and it's almost like the great compromise that took place during the American Civil War with the North. That the compromise to a certain extent that the slave trade was still being perpetrated in the South, until Abraham Lincoln came and finally abolished that. So that was the compromise our founding father made, and as a patronage, they rename that capital after James Maroon. Now, We who are the children of our forefather, if our forefather made mistake or they committed sins or they deviated from the ideology, it is incumbent upon us now to correct those mistakes, to realign our country back to what the intention. The circumstances yesterday that led our forefather to make that compromise or to get that pilgrimage to an individual who he is in. I mean, his ideology, his very ideology that was disaligned with the ideology of the birth of our nation. It is incumbent upon us now to make that correction. That's why we are calling on to that correction. I mean, it is not about, I hear Mr. Harris talking about making an analogy, comparison, and this and that. Yeah, we all have our position, but let's look at the ideology that gave birth to our nation. We will become a laughing stock when we say we are a free nation of blacks from the free slaves that came to liberate ourselves. Then we take upon our slave master name and we name our capital after our slave master. So I think that's what we need to do as the children of our founding father. It's seen with the American Constitution. The American Constitution was crafted in great contradiction. All men are created equal, but the blacks, the Indian, women were subjected to second-class citizens. Today, through the different amendments, the changes that took place, America today, the democracy is being perfected. Your question, finally now, why now? There's a question one of the callers asked. Why now? For those of all who are proponents of change, we are almost like sailors on the sea of the dynamics of life. We often take advantage of the wind when it's blown. When we have the wind at the sail of our idea of change, we raise up our sail. We allow that wind to take us to our destiny. Right now, since this opportunity has presented itself, and that in the beginning there is a call for equity of justice, civil rights and justice, we are using that wind of change to be able to effect the change that have been in demand for a very long time. Yeah. And I'm glad you stated that this is not the first time to call for these changes to be made. It's just that we're using the wind of change now. Thank you, gentlemen. I appreciate the time, and thank you for Dennis.
God bless you. Dennis, can I respond to him?
Yeah. Okay. Let me just take one more caller, and then you respond. As soon as
if you respond to me, Dennis, can I wait? Maybe I don't want him to contradict what I say, or maybe if I have to respond to anything.
Yeah. Please stay on the line. Let me get my next caller, and then you can respond. Caller, your name and where you calling from.
Thank you. I'll put myself on mute so to keep the last.
From Connecticut.
Go ahead, Josiah.
Thank you very much, Dennis. Thank you, Anthony, and I'd like to say good work by the panelists. You know, they're doing extremely well dealing with the topic, the way they should. But I just like to chip in another dimension that we should look at. In support of some of the things the panelists have said, I'd just like to add that Liberia was actually established as a result of the U.S. foreign policy in the 1800s. When they ended the slave trade and then trying to see what possibly could be done about the free men of color, there was a debate about whether or not they should keep those free slaves in the United States to be able to contribute to economic development, contribution to the security, contribution to agriculture. And there were those who felt strongly that their contribution would be meaningful in those respects. And there were those who felt that no, they cannot stay here and live with the white race, even though it wasn't openly expressed in that manner as I'm presenting it, but that was the bottom line. And so the ACS efforts gained momentum, and like the panelists said, that the people like Monroe contributed significantly to their relocation to Africa. And in my mind, those free slaves, the settlers, wanted to be grateful to Monroe and some of the other people who play a major role, who have stake in their return to a place where they will be able to govern themselves, in a way to show some form of appreciation. And so that how the name of Monrovia became one of those means of appreciation, in my opinion. But this is the point. I would like to look at the entire renaming of Monrovia from a comprehensive approach. There are so many things that we need to deal with. Our philosophy as enshrined in the seal, in terms of where we come from, who we are. I think we still have a disagreement or something like that. We still have a disagreement on many of the things that exist in what is being referred to currently as our history. And one of those things that stand out would be the issue of the naming of our capital city, Monrovia, where the settlement was before it was transformed into our country, Liberia. So my opinion is that a lot has to be done in terms of looking at our laws, looking at our history, so that we make our society a just society, and then we begin to look at some of the things that we are talking about now, like the name of Monrovia. The name of Monrovia will just be a distraction to the huge efforts that are required for the transformation of our economy, our country, to make the lives of the people better. I don't think just changing the name instantly is going to have any direct impact on what our economic standing will be. I'll give you a classic example. The South Africans fought, black South Africans fought. They suffered at the hands of their white counterparts, their white kinsmen. South Africans did not just decide to start changing the names of their national shrines and their national institutions. The first thing government started to do, from Mandela to Mbeki, and then to the guy who just left before Ramaphosa could take over, what it did significantly was to bring changes in social services. And that was one of the reasons why the whites continue to accuse many of those guys of huge corruption. Their corruption were in many forms. I agree that some of them stole resources, embezzled resources for their personal gains, but many of the things they did were to better the lives of the black South Africans. They started empowering South Africans to have share in major businesses, major institutions, to compete with their white counterparts, Vodafone and other places. Right. They started making sure that they have a responsibility in municipality governance.
So Joker.
Shawani, for example, if you take Pretoria, for example, the name Pretoria has been changed to Shawani. It did not come overnight to just say, let's change it to Shawani. It was a process.
Right.
They did a review of
Josiah,
their institutions. They had, yes.
Josiah, you are, in other words, because we have had this a committee set up by President Turbot, another committee set up by President Sirleaf. Are you saying we should change the name, but that should be down the line? We shouldn't start with that? Is that what I'm getting?
The point I'm making, changing the name should not even be a subject of discussion right now or debate right now.
Until when? Are you saying later we should do that later?
What we should be discussing? No, I am saying it should be in the framework of rewriting our history, so that if the issue of changing names of national institutions and shrines come up, then it can be discussed. Mind you, the people who name Monrovia, who gave the name Monrovia to the settlement, are Liberians who also came from the United States as free slaves, and we're giving appreciation to people who facilitated their coming to Liberia to settle and live as humans, things that they were deprived of for many years. They are Liberians, and they are our kinsmen. We too, we have ownership to the same land. And so this has been a long-standing divide that we struggle with, that led to the degradation that we suffer today, that led to the hardship, the tough political situation, economic situation, the instability we've had politically. This is the crux of the matter. And if we don't try to put our ideas together, no matter who you are, where you come from, your background, whether a native or somebody who came from the United States or a descendant of that person, we have to come together to review our national symbols and restructure our history to reflect who we are.
Thank you, Joka.
Right.
Thank you. Let's go back to our panelists. We have this school of thoughts. You heard from Mr. J. Howard J. Galakbai Howard. You heard from Prince William, and now Josiah Joka. I start with you, James. You wanted to respond to.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Dennis. That was salient point by my friend and brother Josiah Jokai. I have to say that, as well as with Galakbai Howard in Michigan, to say that Prince spoke of the wind of change, and that kind of sounds reminiscent of the kind of disorderliness, lawlessness carried on by angry protesters and demonstrators, in most instances, rightfully, in destroying, dethroning monuments in honor of traitors and betrayals and racist generals and others. But along that line, the same wind of change led to the destruction of the monument for Frederick Douglass, and an attempt on the Freeman's Monument as well. And that didn't work. They have been cautioned, and Frederick Douglass Monument is going to be re-erected, probably in greater grandeur. But look, I have to say this, those who are advocating for change must be ready to come with cogency. They have to put their argument together. It can't just be snippets and tit for tat. It has to be organized, like what happened in Mississippi. In Mississippi, the demonstrators, they didn't have to go there to make change. It was lawmakers. It was lawmakers who met in the assembly and debated that and decided to change the flag. To this day, Mississippi doesn't have a flag because they removed the racist emblem from the flag, and they have constituted a body that will be dedicated to redesigning a flag for that state. So too is with the advocates for the change of the name of Monrovia, because unfortunately for them, this is not an issue of monument. Probably they may have been energized enough to go to destroy it. In this case, they have the burden to make very salient and cogent argument that will be convincing enough to buy the majority of the Liberian people, whereas some of us who think it should be done within context, it cannot be done outside of context, because it's not about protest, it's not about demonstration, it's about making a point based on history and context. Now, who, like Josiah was saying, who else can know? The young Hillary Teach, the guy who wrote the Liberian Declaration of Independence, he died at the age of 49. Very young man, around 25.
James, that Declaration of Independence is a bad document, but go ahead.
Yeah, well, whatever it is, that is what led to the formation of Liberia. And look, let me stop here and correct that. First of all, had it not been for people like Hillary Teach and other things, we might not have Liberia today. Because to form Liberia, there were 3 colonial armies sent to that small tiny land to seize it. The British came, seized a large portion of Liberia, 2 pieces of land, large portions, and gave them to Freetown, Sierra Leone. The French came, seized a large portion of Liberia down to the southeast and gave it to Ivory Coast and gave the other portion to Guinea. And if you combine those portions, they are larger than Liberia today. Now, the British army went and seized the pieces. The English army went and seized the other 2 pieces. The one we have today is the one that General Robert Stockton, when he led the U.S. Navy group, armed forces, to go there and make sure we have Liberia today. So it's not just about all that it did was bad. It certainly was good. Other than that, we might not have had Liberia today.
And James, sometimes the argument that people make here, they boil it down to, sad to say, American Liberian versus Native. That is the natives that want this change, and they are the ones that are erasing the contribution of American Liberian. In the first place, James Monroe is not American Liberian. So the idea that people who try to take it away because and they are trying to take away a contribution from one sector or one group of our population, I don't think that's fair argument.
Well, again, I have to say that Hillary Teach, as a young man, 25, 23, 25, his father was a minister of the gospel. He himself was a minister of the gospel. He was a journalist, he was an editor, and he was also a merchant. He was an angry young man. I don't even think those of you who feel that you are aggrieved for Monrovia having a name are as angry as he was. Read the Declaration of Independence. That brother is angry. He is very strongly negative words on the American elite and the American authority. Even as he was doing that, he was still part of the group that gave James Monroe the honor. So then the question is, what is it you know today, since about 200 years later, that you know today that that angry man, they didn't know that while he was so angry, he chose to confer honor on James Monroe? What is it? What difference do you know today? What is it that they didn't know? And more than that, you have Zekipa. Ellen Johnson, when she was deceiving the people in Liberia, she talked about building a new capital city that will include proportion of and ambassador and call it Zekipa. Go there and build your country. But like Josiah said, this is just distraction. This is distracting our effort, because study has proven that wherever people are heavily divided, there can be peace. And the one thing that can ensure the peace is for everybody to have a voice. People need to have a voice. And Dennis, like you said the last time doing the show, the last panel, when we have decentralization, people will have a voice and they will be able to forget about Monrovia, build a new city, and name. Liberia is a virgin land. Most of the places don't have names, basically. Go and build and develop the place. If you have Bon County autonomous, I might not be interested in national politics. I'm gonna go to Bon County and contribute what I have in my head and what I have experienced.
No, James, you got
decentralization. So an attempt for us to focus on changing the name of Monrovia simply on the basis of mere controversy is not enough, is not necessary, and it's an absolute distraction from focus on the burning issues facing the nation and people today.
Mr. Harris, your response to the callers.
Mr. Harris, before you make your intervention, around you is getting dark. It's like you don't have much light. And folks, before Mr. Harris can come in, let me remind you, we pin an opinion pool below the live feed or at the bottom of the live feed. We appreciate it if you can participate in that opinion pool. It's a very easy process. It will not even take you 20 seconds to complete. The pool is about the topic we are discussing. If you are one of those who support the idea of the name change, just go there and make your contribution there. And if you're not, you can also make your contribution. Sometime at the end of the show, we will be able to show the result on the screen so that Larsah and Mr. Harris can know whether they're on the wrong side or the right side based on those who will participate. Thank you. Mr. Harris.
Thank you very much. Listening to the callers, I mean, I don't want to dabble into politics. I just want to deal with the historicity if I can, right? So the political issue, it can get contagious. I don't want to just be based truly on politics. We have to look at the facts, right? And have to read the words of the original people, at least, based on what was their thinking when they named the place after who they named it after, right? So that's why I want to keep on. I don't want to do too much on the political side of things and stuff like that. So I agree with the caller that said we should do this. This should be looked at holistically, right? We can have a conversation about symbols and who and everybody who wasn't included or left out in the process, and we should do that. But the thing is, if Monrovia was not the capital city of Liberia, nobody would care who would name it after. I doubt anybody would want to. Everybody would care if Monrovia name or anything else if it wasn't the capital city. So to that end, if you really think this is a problematic thing, the settlement there was a settlement. Monrovia was a settlement before it became a capital city and all that stuff. When the settlers named the place Monrovia, they were not naming it for a capital city, right? They were naming it for their home. This is where they were appreciating somebody. So if you really feel strongly about Monrovia and the name change and if Monrovia being the name of the capital city of your country, then we can do the right thing, right? We can, like somebody said, Liberia is a virgin land, right? We haven't even touched and most of it, right? We can go somewhere, build a new capital city because the current one is even congested, right? The place we're making noise about is congested, it's filthy, they have surpassed the amount of people that it was meant for. So let's go build a new capital city. We name it after who we want to name it after. Do what we want to do. Strip the capital city moniker from on Monrovia and give it and just leave the settlement as it is. You don't even have to do anything. Just leave the settlement Monrovia there, right? Just because of the historicity. And we can build a new capital and all this problem will be solved in a nutshell, right? We will be talking about this.
I don't know when this history starts. Are you erasing the history of those, because Monrovia had a name before that time. So when you say historicity, I go back to that. But let me bring in one more caller. Caller 267 area code, your name and where you calling from. Hello, caller, go ahead. Your name and where you calling from. Oh, Vasiki Kone.
Oh, my name is Vasiki. Yes.
Vasiki, go ahead. Vasiki.
All right. Yes.
Vasiki, are you
Here's
trying to
what I
start a
want to say.
debate? Are you trying to start a debate, Vasiki? You should wait for the debate.
Okay.
Let him come. I will
I'm just
respond to
trying to
him.
contribute.
Go ahead, Vasiki. You are
All
breaking.
right. What I'm trying to find out, one of your callers was saying that, talking about Princeton University as related to the formation of Liberia. But Woodrow Wilson, whose name is on one of the institutions of Princeton University, his name is being removed because of his racist policy and some of the things he said about the black people at the time. Now we have a man who called black people useless people, and they don't have to be here. They should be they should be pushed out of America to go and redeem the ignorant and barbaric Africans. Those two views are very racist. Why is James Larsah's support for such men need to be on our capital? Is he not offended by those racist statements made about African Americans that are pushed out of here and to the native Africans that they met in Africa? Is he not offended by that racist view about us and about our people that was pushed out of here?
Thank you.
You want me to come in, Dennis?
Yes, sir. Go for it.
Well, there's so much. They seem as in the American context where the black man may prefer to be called a nigger, only if it is said by a fellow black. But when he is called a nigger by a non-black, then that's the only time it becomes an issue. Like Dennis was inferring earlier, if you look in the Declaration of Independence, Liberia's Declaration of Independence, the word barbaric is mentioned a couple of times, although it has its meaning. And if you want to be candid, you can agree that it wasn't out of context, although it might have been inappropriate. But you may have to convince me, though. I've read a bit on James Monroe, and having come across him on record in such terms, if you can, let me know, send that to me. But then we can have a discussion. But even the free slaves, you have to know that the blacks that went to Liberia were not all free slaves. Some of them were free men. Like Hilary Teach was never a slave in his life. His father was, but he wasn't. And there were a lot of Africans that General Robert Stockton intercepted the ships on the sea who had been captured along farmers. Our very fathers, traditional African leaders, were selling human beings. They were even and that was one of the reasons why there were frequent clashes between the natives and the settlers, because the natives had come in anger against slave trade, and the African traditional leaders in Liberia and elsewhere didn't, and so they were still selling, marketing and trafficking in slaves. So General Stockton was about to capture 950 Africans, return them. Those were not slaves then because they had not reached their destination. So Liberia had free slaves and free men who were never slaves before. And they, in their Declaration of Independence, used some of the words of which you are now accusing James Monroe for, although that still stands to be corrected if you can send me the support. And I still vouch that even if that is true, that may not be enough. I know about Woodrow Wilson, and the Princeton has a long history. Princeton is not James Monroe. James Monroe, by the way, let me tell you a little bit about him. James Monroe was the last of the founding fathers of America who became president. And he was regarded as not among those who are considered scholarly, because he wasn't viewed as smart, but he was viewed for other things that were considered more important, such as integrity, character, and belief in God. And he was very loved. That's why he was successful. And he had a doctrine of non-intervention. He made sure there were no slaves after they brought the slaves in Brazil and other places. After that, there were going to be no slaves coming from Spain and from Portugal to South America. So James Monroe is no Woodrow Wilson, or the Princeton family has a long history, generation from generation to generation, of dwelling and building their image out of slave trade. And there was no regret. They didn't do anything that James Monroe to point to any evidence of evolution of a man, or change of mind, or even goodwill towards the slaves. However, in the Declaration of Independence, it is mentioned there over and over that we were helped by men of goodwill of the Christian church and of the government. And James Monroe was part of that.
Thank
so
you.
He to be
Thank you, James. We have heard so many good things that turn out not to be true. The story of Material Nipo is one, but I'm not trying to dispute your point. Let's read some comments here of Mr. Jai. Let me start and then you continue. This one from Blow J Nation. So the panelists, I won't move. I'm trying to use my computer and it's moving fast enough. Morris Law, right? I wonder these guys are for real. These guys said in the U.S., oh, you'll leave with the U.S. people alone. Said in the U.S. after eating hamburger and bringing issue out that have no substance. Why not think about Liberians and see how to help the suffering masses? I am sorry to say that some of you people learn. I'll leave it right there. You didn't elect us. Well, most of us came here all by ourselves. So the people you elected are the ones you should go behind. Hamanda Brahimat, right? Those uncultured elements in human existence calling themselves American Liberians were dangerous. Wow, that man is coming down hard. Bloodshed Nation, what is a convincing reason? Asking the question right there. Let me come to the one by Vivian Powerhouse. Nobody stopped the natives from developing their land or their control areas. Up to 2020, the natives are still sleeping in villages and huts. Why are our people not improved yet? Those stopping or preventing them, who's stopping or preventing them from moving a step further? And then this one from Di Piero, the last name, no president birthday needs to be celebrated in Liberia. We need a presidential day. That's all. Most of these presidents of Liberia have nothing to point at, from J.J. Robert to Totman. Bloodshed Nation here with this one. Duka was not named because of the pellet numerical strength. Rather, the colonists took the pellet version because the Bassa people were resistant to the ACSS colonial route. Let me read another one here. Dennis Gave said to read some as well. Yeah, go for it, Dennis.
Robin Dripple, were the original settler house slaves or free slave? This is important because it will shed light on the issue of appreciation of Moreau. The original set, were they house slaves or field slaves? Sorry, said that will help. Peter Boko Kole Kamun, you're better talking about healthcare, education, etc.
Correct.
Time stupid topic. What changing the name of Monrovia had to do with our people suffering? Sad, sad, sad. Every day somebody in Liberia want help. They want somebody to give their souls. But Moresu, the powerhouse, you are right. These other so-called educated Liberians are not serious. I think it was the COVID-19 spirit. Yeah, the other online class. Okay, something about online classes. Sorry, my Maurice Slew. Why this other guy shaking his seat? That's you,
Mr. Harris. Is too much movement from your end.
Bloodshed Nation. The British and French seized Liberians' land due to the authoritarian behavior of Lieutenant Robert Stockton, who was seizing British and French vessels on the coastal line. So the British and French were simply retaliating to America's expansionist behavior in that region at a time.
Where'd you read that history from?
Then few will say, Bloodshed, they weren't just seizing those ships, they were fighting against the transporting of slaves of those vessels, carrying those countries' flags, shipping Africans to the New World. Then we put a comment here from the history book. Moreau was part of the African Colonization Society formed in 1816, which included members like Henry Clay and Andrew Jackson. These men were not abolitionists, but they did find common ground with some abolitionists who supported the notion of colonization, that is, relocating former slaves to other countries. This group helped and sent several thousand free slaves I like to call them ex-slave because the word free slaves is stupid. It doesn't make sense. You can't be free and be a slave again.
Unless it's
slave owners like Monroe and Jackson had was to prevent free blacks from influencing slaves dealt in southern states. With about 100,000 in federal grant money, the organization also bought land for those people in what is today Liberia. The capital, Liberia, was named Monrovia after James Monroe. It is the only foreign capital to be named after an American president. That's a little thing we got from the history book that we posted. And so, James and Percy, my question is, in spite of the reason that these fellow Africans were sent to Liberia, would the reason matter why we should name it? If Monroe's reason was, his intention was bad, should he be honored? Or should the reason not matter? Percy, you take that.
I mean, we can speculate now, right, and say if we can speculate on the motive of the ACS and
no, it's not speculation. They wanted to relocate. They didn't want these people to mingle, so it's like, let's get them out of here. So go ahead.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. There was more than one reason why the ACS were formed. There was a confluence of people and confluence and idea that made up the ACS. It was not just one group, right? That only slaveholder. There were abolitionists. There was like people who were Christianizing the people in West Africa, and so it was not just for a specific reason. So when we say it was only the slaveholders, then we'll be negating the fact that other people were there for abolitionist reason also. So we'll be negating those people from the process. So we can't do that. It was a amalgamation of ideas that led to the ACS. And one point I keep trying to make here is it's the action. You can only tell by somebody's action, right?
Correct,
if the person means well or bad, you can only tell from their action. Correct. If Monroe saw him it was diabolical, it was evil, and he just wanted to get black people out of the way, right? I mean that was a tall order for him to go through Congress, securing funds. You know how the political process works in America. Not today it started. So it's a laborious process to go through Congress and get great money and stuff like that to facilitate an organization that you did not believe in, that you just wanted to expel black people from America. That's very laborious process for anybody to go through. That's a whole lot to go through just to send people back to Africa, right?
And Harris, if I can jump in here, I know you're trying to make this process to look so hectic just to make Monroe look good. Do you think Monroe could do?
No, I am not trying to make Monroe look good. I'm just looking at the facts as they are. I'm not trying to make anybody look good.
But the fact also, if you don't mind, the fact also is that at some point, these blacks wanted freedom. And one of the option they had was to leave the land, United States, or to leave America. That was the option. They didn't have the will to do so. Similarly, the slave owners, the whites at the time, at some point they felt that, well, we can't keep the people among ourselves, so we have to let them go. And the only way they could let them go was to repatriate them to a country where they were taken from originally. So whatever process they went through, the intent was they didn't want those people there. So whatever they had to do to get them out of their presence or among their midst, whether it was seen as tedious, it was only to satisfy their desire that they should not mingle with the black men.
But that would be, that's what I'm saying to you.
Let me learn. You can't give such a man credit for making efforts that will make him to achieve his goal and not necessarily the goal of the people who wanted freedom. Don't you see it that way?
But then I said this to you then. Then you only gave him one side of the ACS, right? Because the ACS was a multiplicity of interest, right? So there were the abolitionists in there. So what's the argument against the abolitionists there, right? So what the abolitionists just didn't want black people here.
No, but in this case, we're talking about James Monroe and why we're talking about certain. Don't forget our major subject.
But if you're talking about James Monroe within the context of the ACS, then you have to understand that the ACS was not a monolithic organization. That's what I'm trying to make you to understand. It was not a monolithic organization. You have people with divergent backgrounds and divergent ideology that made up the ACS. That's what I'm trying to make you understand. And what you just explained was that from one side, that was the slaveholder prerogative for joining the ACS. I'm telling you, there were abolitionists also. So what was the reason for being in there?
Percy, the abolitionist doesn't mean you are abolitionist, so you want blacks to be here. You can still free the people and send them away. So I don't want you to make the argument that because they were abolitionists, so it meant for them to mingle with blacks here in the United States.
No. When you call somebody an abolitionist, especially when the Quakers, right? They believe their belief system was different from that of the southern slaveholder. It was just different. It was not because they wanted to expel black people from here. That was not the rationale. That's what I'm saying to you. So we have to look at the multiplicity of people that was making up the ACS. Now, when you come to James Monroe and the action that his government took, because the ACS itself was just an idea, and there was no. Our people call something where the rubber hits the road is where funding come in, right? The idea was just there; it was up in the air, right? Everybody had this grand idea about how black people should get back to Africa, right? Monroe administration was the one, right, that made it possible. We can sit here and talk about healthcare today. Everybody can talk about healthcare, but Obama was the one that made the ACS possible. We started talking about healthcare way back then. So Obama gets the credit for that. That's what I'm saying to you guys.
Mr. Harris, hold on, Dennis.
I want to bring you a color, but if you look at that in the form of deportation, right? If you look at it in the form of deportation, don't you think when let's look at our current president, if they want to deport blacks, you don't think they're going to find money anyhow to do it?
Does it mean that his intention is good and we should honor him at the end of the day? Because that is the point you are making, and I like the way you brought the political aspect of it. And so let's talk the political aspect. There was a man who had so much power, and he wanted to achieve something. He wanted blacks to not be mingle with his kind. And that was a political opportunity. It's an equivalence of somebody wanting to run for office as they're doing today, the dividing rest. These people were not dividing rest, but now they know that election coming around, the dividing rest. I will not honor such a man who gives the old man down Larsah a cup of rice when in fact his intention is to snatch a vote from that woman. And when he gets that vote, it is for his own benefit and not the benefit of that woman. That's the argument you're making. And I'm saying I cannot honor such a man by naming our capital in his name.
But you have to understand this, right? You lived in America, you know what the political process is here. It was not different. It was even hectic even back then, right? So you know what the political process is. It's a heavy lifting to go through Congress, seek funding for an idea that wasn't popular.
Don't make it look like this is a real great system. I mean, whatever, for instance, whatever Trump says.
We're talking about an era that racism was
I think we need one important clarification here. By the time the Act of Law was passed in Congress, by the time the appropriation was done for the $125,000, James Monroe had long stopped being president. He was still president. He had already left. He had left.
Monroe left office in 1825.
But he had an influence. No, Percy, I'm supporting an argument. He had an influence to facilitate all of those, but he wasn't president as if within the context you guys are speaking that he had absolute authority or the constitutional authority to just so easily pass it through. No, he was an ordinary citizen and a former president with great amount of influence. And by the way, I wanted to chip in just a little bit. To say that if you look at Liberia today, the landscape of Liberia,
James, he was president 1817 to 1825. James
correct. Yeah, and independence was gained 1847.
No, Monrovia was named Monrovia in 1825. When he was leaving office, that when we need Monrovia.
Exactly. So then I'm talking about the money to support the newly formed government was when he had left office. Now, I'm not talking about naming Monrovia. I'm just they're trying to make it look like it was so easy to be done. No, he was also a man of great.
But it wasn't.
Correct. Now, yes, the point I'm
talking for this system where Democrat support whatever Democrats say, Republican support whatever Republicans say. So make it look like, I mean, it was such a tedious process. Oh, American citizens like sausage.
Yeah, but to make that argument, you have to know the makeup of the entire house to say, yeah, the Democrat president said this, Democrat follow it. You will have to know the makeup of the house, right?
No, so in that time,
what was the makeup of the house? What was the makeup of the Senate at the time?
In fact,
Democrats. So you have to understand that.
I would look at the makeup of white people and black people and those who were racist and those who were those who were not racist. That's how I would look at it.
Okay,
And
but then
that racist agenda, that's what they're going to go by.
If all this argument is about racism and about
no, it's not all about racism. Don't make it that way.
But if Jim Monroe was so racist in this whole thing, right?
No.
Right?
No, it is about slavery. It's not racism. It's about slavery.
Okay, great. But yeah, so she didn't deviate.
Yeah, but if Jim Monroe was a slave owner, that's the argument you guys are making. But it brought us on morality. If Jim Monroe was a slave owner, and that's the only.
You are muted.
You got muted.
If the only reason you got not to be named Monrovia, then there was another layer to him. Then I will give you an example. Samuel Doe. Samuel Doe has installation named after him. Should we be tearing it down because of the despotism that he died into Liberia? Tubman, William B.S. Tubman. He has installation streets and places named after him. He was a despot. It's a despot. It's a fact. So do we tear down those things that we name after them? Is that the rationale for you guys? Yeah. So if
we have no rationale. We're asking you the question.
If this person was bad on this one end, they don't deserve to be honored on the other end when they did good.
Exactly. And they are the same ones who will be advocating to honor Saboso. Our traditional leaders were engaged in slavery. The African leaders were engaged in slavery. The very Saboso you're talking about. And I want to point out that even in the entire Liberia that has 43,000 square miles, and Monrovia is just a tiny bit. It's not even 5%. It's not 1%. It's not 0.01%. It's very low. Monrovia is 75 miles. Liberia is 43,000 miles of land. You understand? So if just and that is the only best part of the entire country since the nearly 200 years of existence. What bad did Moro do for them to find 22?
This is a power play. And
build Freeport and build Freeport free of charge. How about the RIA? Firestone, the JV, from the time the ACS got defunct in 1964, Liberia has been on a decline.
All right.
Let me in the rest of the land.
Let me bring in your caller. Let me bring in a caller here. Mr. Sai Nyokron Nyasio. You are live.
Am I allowed? Am I allowed?
Go ahead.
Please let me talk. Please let me talk. Please let me talk. Please let me talk. Because it seems that most of you are not aware of colonialism. When people colonize. Okay. Look, small brother. Small brother, yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Please listen to me.
Yeah, it looks like you are listening to the
subject matter was the subject matter was the changing of the capital of Monrovia from Monrovia to the original name. Colonialism, whenever they go any place, they always rename the place. That's the subject that we need to deal with. What was the intent of them naming the place Monrovia? What was the intent of the former slave going back to Africa? Those are the things that we need to look at. The intent. Monroe was a racist. And I'm not only talking about it, I can prove it. If you give me your email address, I will send you all of the information. That Monroe, the reason why they got rid of those people was because of the successful revolt that took place in Haiti. There were free slaves who were amongst them. Even Lincoln, I can give you an idea of information where Lincoln said he'd rather save the
the country than to have the free slaves. So what I'm saying, let's not beg the issue. Let's not use the people, the revisionist Liberian history. What we have in Liberia that were teaching us was the history of the settlers. They never talked about the history of the indigenous people when they were there. Everything that was negative, they alluded to our people. So let's not come sit here talking about Monroe was a good person, he was this and that. Monroe was a racist. And I'm willing to even talk about this other guy here called, what his name said.
Okay.
So we need to, a lot of things are changing now. The only thing that is constant is change. You won't say because your name has been there for a long time, this and that, so we shouldn't change it.
Thank you.
Those people, that area is most of the ethnic group that were there, they call it Duka. The Kla people call it Truba. The Bassa people call it Druba. The Pele people call it Duka. So why will you bother? Why will you bother not to go and change the name because you said it has been there for a long time, this and that? Those are begging the issue. So if you send me your email address, I will send you information on all of these people, why they decided to deport the slaves, the former slaves, to a place where they name Liberia.
Thank you, Mr.
I rest my issue.
Thank you. You can send that email to focusonliberia@gmail.com, and we'll take our last caller for the night. Caller, your name and where you calling from. Hello, caller, 630 area code. Your name and where you calling from.
This is Esther, and I'm calling from Chicago, Illinois.
Welcome, Esther, to Focus on Liberia. We are glad to have you. Your question or comment?
Thank you so much, Prof. Ja. This is Esther Tapi. I'm glad to be on this show. This is my first time, and what I was looking at, most of us live in America, so when we're talking about name change, it may sound easy to us because we can wake up and turn our electricity is running, our children are going to school even online, we have jobs, and there are many things that we can do. Americans reacted to what is affecting them at this present condition. I think, personally, that's my view. We should be looking at what is affecting Liberians at this time. When you look in Liberia today, our healthcare system is poor. If somebody has kidney problem, they cannot do dialysis. Our children are being raped by old men, and people don't come and talk about it. Little girls are being abused. Our schools are not up to standards. I feel no running water. These are the things that we Liberians, that is affecting us at this present condition. That's what we should be discussing. Name change is important, but also our mindset. That is the most important thing. If we change name today, will that put food on Liberians' table? If we change name today, will that create jobs, good roads? I feel that we should focus on what is affecting us, because this is just reaction to what is affecting Americans, racism. I have a kid. He's a college student, and I know what it means to be a black man in this country or a black person. So I think we should focus on what is affecting our people, especially our little girls and boys that are being abused in that country. And I rest my case here. Thank you so much for having me on your show.
Thank you, Esther. And James, you heard she called me Prof. Ja. We don't small people here.
I know you, my prof. You taught me now.
Oh, okay.
And
All
Mr.
right.
Mr. Jah, please remind our viewers about the pool. It's important. We want to get their
Yeah, and
involvement
viewers,
in this decision
we
making.
have we have it tagged there at we have it pinned. So far, 73 responses. 67% say change that name, Monrovia. 23 say don't do it. 9.6 say this is not important. And I believe Esther is in that 9.6 say, hey, this is not our issue. Or
Yes.
guys, what's your comment? I think
And
Esther made a very
Mr. Jah, hold on. Our viewers are not doing us justice here. Since we pinned it and announced it over and over, only one person voted. Most of the votes came from the last time we did the show and asked people to participate. But we have almost 50 people viewing and only 2%. Okay, another person voted, so 2% so far. So if all the 40 plus people, 50
How do
plus
we
people that are
vote?
watching can participate just now, it will do us a favor. We put in time and we want our our viewers to be
it's pinned,
participatory in the
pinned
process.
on
So
the
please
show
do
there.
so. It takes less than 20 seconds.
It's pinned there on the show if you can see it. And Prince William say he's still on the call. But let me get feedback from my panelists. You heard from Sanyokron Nyasio and Esther Tapi. What's your take? James, you go.
By the way, I want to acknowledge my own big brother. He called me small brother, not by mistake, because that's how we call. He's my big brother. That's my own training, my own upbringing as a Pele Poro Society member. I give him a lot of respect, and I know him to be a man of great passion when it comes to the subject of history. So I add a lot more, much more to what he said than otherwise, even though he and I ultimately will not agree on the argument. So I want to agree with Sis Esther that, like Josiah Joker said, this exercise is nothing but futility. Futility is a complete distraction from the serious business that should be occurring, that should claim our attention and focus. Just recently, we have a system in Liberia that the condition in Liberia is just so bad. Like she said, gender-based violence against all kinds of people, but mainly against women and young babies, young girls. You know, this is something we should be talking. What we're talking is a distraction, and it means a lot. If things are going in a country that should be claiming our attention, we maybe doing things that may look as though we are doing it deliberately so that focus can be shifted from this issue onto this complete triviality. We should be discussing the issue of reconciliation, the implementation of the TRC recommendation. We need to be discussing political power devolution, which is decentralization, so that, like I said, there has been a study done in America here that is scientific, that even in the midst of deep-seated division, one thing that can bring about peace, even when the people are divided, is when they have a voice. The government, the system in Liberia is such that the people don't have a voice. You have a clique deciding everything and doing anything. That's what we should be discussing now. It's unfortunate. We should be discussing the need for healthcare, investment in healthcare and others. It's just unfortunate. And so I will really stop here to say that
and Larsah, these healthcare issues and all the other governance issues you just talked about, how long we've been discussing these things and things seems to be the same? And you're taking this matter to be trivial and you say this is complete triviality? Is that how you?
Well, I really have to apologize for that if it was understood in the context of discrediting the hard work that you guys are doing. I'm not saying
no, not us. It's just the topic of teaching the name.
But certainly in terms of the proponents, yes, stand by that. For example, a former warlord general who was accused of massacring people passed away in Monrovia recently, and he was given huge honor in the face of hunger and starvation in our country. Some of the people who think that that was the right thing to do are the ones who prefer that we don't be discussing that and be funny on that, but to be distracted and instead focus on discussing Monrovia which is the best place in Liberia and wouldn't have been the best place in Liberia if the situation of the free slaves coming had not happened. I bet you there may have been no country at all called Liberia, like I said, because we had 3 invasions from 3 different colonial powers. And when that happened, 3 of them led to 3 different partition of lands. The other one went to Africans and Guinea through France, and the other 2 portions went to Sierra Leone through Great Britain. We are Liberia today because of what the American never did. We can't forget that. And they built the Freeport, $22 million those days, free of charge to us. What have you done in Banga? What have you done in Granji there? In Lofa? What have you done in Bapolu or Bopolu? What have you done there? No, nothing. We should be discussing this 75 miles compared to 43,000 miles that is virgin. This is a waste of time and a distraction. Thank you.
Mr. Harris?
This was a nice discussion. I think I want to disagree with the fact that this is not important. Heritage is always important, and you don't have to do one or the other. I mean, these conversations should always be held, right? We should always have these conversations. It's very, very important. It goes to the heart of who we are as a country, right? And so I don't think we should devalue it or make it secondary to what is important in the country. Very important. Having said that, I think the proponents of name change are basically running on old passions, right? They are mistaking what is obtaining in America to try to transmute that to Liberia, which is unfortunate because what is obtaining here, what I obtained here, it was that rebels that lost the Civil War decided to perpetuate themselves as victors in history by building monuments and preaching the narratives of what's obtaining here. And so that's what offend most people in this country, especially Black people. But the people who fought to keep them as property in this country, right? To be honored, to be in Congress, for them to be built monuments and name and places after. That's what offend most Black people here. Now, when it comes to Liberia, that's a whole different conversation which we had on that side of the Atlantic, right? What happened there was quite different from what happened here or what people are mad about here. So I think we should have these conversations, but we should have them in a more introspective way, where we examine the facts for what they are and go to the people and look at the people and what they were thinking. The original people, what they were thinking when they named this place after who they named it after, and not just dwell on old passions and moral arguments, right? I mean, that just doesn't cut it.
All right, thank you, gentlemen. We are about to wind this down. We gone exact 2 hours since we started with this conversation. I think you guys did well. You make your case, but you have an uphill battle to climb in terms of the opinion sampling that we have been doing. And so that would be my final question, and that will be what I will ask you to close with as your closing statement. Again, I will read to you that 68.1% of the 72% who responded to the question, should we change Liberia's capital city name from Monrovia to a different name? 68.1% said yes, whereas 23.6% said no, and 8.3% say it's not important. So, gentlemen, we should go by the opinion pool. You are on the wrong side of this piece of history that we're trying to make. So, how can you make the argument and close?
Mr. C, just give me one. There is a clemency from the CEO of FOL to bring in one more person.
Clemency denied. But anyway, go for it.
Sekou Keita, you are live. Please introduce yourself and where you calling from and your comment briefly. You have 48 seconds.
Thank you so much. Good evening, everybody. My name is Sekou Keita. I'm a Liberian. I live in Maryland, the great United States of America. Well, I wrote the original article that appeared in Front Page Africa about changing Liberia's name from James Monroe. For the most part, I think some people took that as an attack on the settlers who arrived and their descendants. By no means is this the case. I think for us that are pretty much involved with Liberian history, knowing ourselves. I think it's important for us to remove ourselves from Mr. James Monroe, knowing that this guy was a slave owner, and the reason why he joined the American Colonization Society was to get rid of black people, free slaves who we did not think were fit to be neighbors, who we did not think were fit to be citizens who shared the same protection and rights in the United States as a white person. A lot of people will say that he helped raise the $100,000 that was given to the slaves for them to be sent over to Liberia. Yes, I do agree with that, but everything in life is all about intentions. What were those intentions? Is it because that he saw black people, the free slaves, as humans? No, he did not. He saw them as property. So again, he put in all his efforts to make sure that these unfit humans were sent back to where they came from, back home to Liberia. And if we are going to change anything in Liberia, we have to start with our name. I have no problem with the country's name, Liberia. Again, after liberty, yes, they sought liberty. But you can't name your capital city after a slave owner, someone who did not see you as an equal. If he was alive today, you couldn't sit at the same table as James Monroe for a fact, because he was a slave owner. He thought of us as property. There is absolutely no way we can honor this man, continue to honor him for almost 200 years. For almost 200 years as a slave owner.
Thank you.
We have to rethink what we are trying to do in Liberia. I know there are a lot of issues that are going on in Liberia. We've been fighting these issues for generations. It's not going to stop now. But the conversation really, I think, what can unite all of us is we have to agree on our identity. And on that identity, you have to know who you are. You have to change your name. You can't go around boasting freedom everywhere when your capital city is named after a slave owner. That does not absolutely make any sense at all. That's what you call insanity.
Thank you, sir.
That's what I will stop there for now.
Can
I briefly respond to that quickly? Because the caller that just called, that's what I'm talking about. People call on this issue based on sheer passion, no historicity. They are breadth of history. The same man that named Monrovia was the same guy that named Liberia. But this guy have no problem with Liberia being called Liberia. Robert Kudo Harper, right? The general that named, the Maryland senator that named, what happened? The capital city of Maryland, Harper. The Robert Kudo Harper was the one that named Monrovia. He's the same guy that named Liberia. This guy that just called just now, with all historical reference whatsoever, has a problem with Monroe, right? But he doesn't have a problem with Robert Kudo Harper. You see the problem we have here? People just come on this platform.
And it's because we are talking Monrovia, Mr. Harris. We're talking about Monrovia.
But you cannot just say you got a problem with Monroe, but you don't have a problem with Harper. Harper, who named the country.
We're not talking about Harper. We're talking about Monrovia.
Yeah, but that's what I'm saying to you. You cannot say you have a problem with the name Monrovia, but the guy that gave the name, who also was the same as Monroe, right? In terms of owning slaves and whatnot, the same guy who was also a member of the American Colonization Society, who gave the name Liberia that he's okay with, Liberia, but he's not okay with Monrovia. I don't understand.
The argument there, or Percy, is not about the name; it's about the honor. Okay, so if Liberia was not named in honor of the Harper guy you talk about.
So let me ask you guys this question before we go. Will you guys be okay? Will you guys be okay if Monrovia was not a capital city of Liberia? Let's say we strip capital city of Liberia. Will you still have a problem with the name Monrovia?
Hold on. You made an equivalence that the same guy who named it Monrovia is the same guy who named Liberia, but he's okay with the name Liberia. Liberia is not named in honor of any person or any slave master.
Yeah, it's a Latin word, right? The guy named Liberia from a Latin phrase, right? Did we ever go back to see where that Latin phrase originated, where it came from, how he managed to put it on the country?
It's irrelevant. The name.
No, it's not. It's not irrelevant.
It is irrelevant because we know the meaning.
It is not. You did not study the etymology of Liberia. You just know it. You like the name.
We know the meaning.
It's going to be a tall order to even get off the country. So you guys want to dodge that, right? How can you be okay, right, with a guy that named the country?
We're not dodging anything yet. We're not dodging anything, Mr. Harris. The meaning Liberia, you know the definition. Do you not know the definition of Liberia?
No, but if you have the problem here is if you have a problem with slave owner naming places in Liberia.
No, it's not about slave owner naming places. Right? It's about being naming a place in honor of a slave owner. That's it. They are two different things. Don't confuse yourself.
Yeah, but Robert Goodall have a name like Robert Goodall have a name like Bureau in Monrovia.
All right, I think we should wrap it down.
We should wrap it down. So, Mr. Jah, this will be my final question to them. And in this question, you are closing, gentlemen. We've gone more than 2 hours. Let me start with you, Harris. Will you name your son in honor of James Maroon, saying, you know, this guy did so much good? Will you want to do that? And then finally, the opinion poll is saying that you are not on the right side of the discussion. 68.1% say we should change the name. Are you not just making empty noise here? To close.
I'm not too bothered about the opinion pool, because if the nature of the question in and of itself is not nuanced, right? If you ask people if you want a name change to Monrovia, from Monrovia to something else, anybody can say, yeah, whether they want the name change from another capital to another capital, that's a whole different story. So the nature of the question in and of itself does not, is not indicative of what people's opinions are. So that's one. Two, personally, my name is Percy Harris, right? You hear my name, no African person name is Percy. I was named after, right, my auntie who married an African American soldier. His name was Percy Smith. So I was named after Percy here. So Percy was a nice guy. I know who I was named after. I know what he did for the family and all that stuff. So I know who I am, right? It's about us, like Brent, knowing who we are. And part of that does not mean that we should strip people of their identity. When you want to form a country, you form it around shared value. You don't form it around discarding somebody else's a contribution to the country. You form it around share value, the things we all share in common. That's what you want. That's what you rally around. You don't go for the most sacred thing, or to say somebody another person's ancestor was crazy because they named they're dwelling after a guy that helped repatriate them. They were not supposed to show gratitude. Basically, they were supposed to be an ingrate, right? And then you claim to be an African, where we prioritize the vice of, the virtue of gratitude. Then you castigate people when they show gratitude. Then who we are, right?
I wish you had answered the question I asked you. Will you name your son in honor of James Monroe?
Let's wrap it up.
It depends who James Monroe was to me, right? That's what people name children. Their children. It depends who named James Monroe was to me, right? If I saw James Monroe as a benefactor, like the settlers saw James Monroe, yeah, I would name my son after him. I won't care. He's different. I don't care what
I asked you a direct question, and now you're breaking conditions. Thank you so very much.
No condition. If I saw it, it depends. What's are the things you find yourself?
When you said depends, what are you talking about? You're talking about condition. I asked you a direct question.
You see Jim Monroe saw it as a slave owner. You see Jim Monroe as a slave owner. I'm telling you, there was more to Jim Monroe and how the settlers saw him. He was more than a slave owner to them. He was a benefactor. So there's more. It's a compound layer to that. That's what I'm saying to you.
We got your point. We need to close the broadcast.
All right, we lost James, so he will not close. Mr. Percy Harris, we want to say thank you, for honoring the invitation. I think you made a lot of good points. You debated the issue with spirit, and you were knowledgeable, and I appreciate that. That is what we should do. When we come to this conversation, we should be prepared. Yeah, because we are always prepared to ask the tough questions, so as we can get something from you that the audience can benefit from. That is the only intent and sole purpose. Again, we will reach out to you anytime we want to. We have time, then you can come and to discuss further. Again, we are asking the team that is against the NIMI for a debate with those that support the idea, and we'll love to have you. Thank you for honoring our invitation. Mr. Jah.
We want to thank you, Mr. Harris, and also Mr. Larsah, who due to technical issues is not with us to close. We want to thank all our viewers, those who participated through comments or calling, or those who just watch and just enjoy the show. We appreciate it. As always, focus on Liberia. We strive to educate, to elevate, and promote all things Liberia. We want to have these conversations as much as possible so that we talk instead of fighting. next week or sometime, we're going to invite the two groups to debate the issues and make sure to start this conversation. It's a way to go. Again, let's talk instead of fighting. July 26th will be our virtual Independence Day. We want all of you to turn out, but James will give you the opportunity to give your last word, and then we can close.
I appreciate that. I don't know what's happening here today. My closing comment is just as simple as this. But answering to you, I keep hearing you stressing the issue of the pool, and that's important. But I found solace in the fact that it was good you disclosed the number of participants in the pool is just under 50. Not only that it is small, it is just so minuscule, and so we can rest assured that as this debate goes on, the pool will continue to go on, and we know that the realistic pool will be what will take place in Liberia if and when, if at all, this will ever gain ground or momentum in the country, and the Liberian people will decide as to which way to go. And by then, we are just about confident that we will be able to prevail in that debate. But concerning the overall debate today on the need to change Monrovia, I just want to say that, like Percy said earlier, the relationship between America and Liberia is unique. Just about every country that has been friendly with America, that has been connected to America, has been a successful country, has been a great country, such as Japan. America wrote Japan's constitution, such as Germany, the Marshall Plan, such as many other countries.
Philippines.
Yeah, well, yeah. And yeah, it goes on to Liberia as well. I have said over and over that Monrovia is the best place in Liberia ever. Nowhere. Since the 200 years, nearly 200 years, Monrovia is the best place, even in spite of the war. Why is it the case? It has to be because of the relationship between America and Liberia.
I disagree.
From the free slaves that came. They granted us $125,000 free of charge. They built a free port for us, $22 million, way back free of charge. Why do we have Ferguson Company in Liberia? Why do we have JV Venture Lamco Company in Nima today? You understand? And I want to say, going back, the free slaves really proved to be productive. I just checked on Liberia balance of trade today.
James, let me stop you there. The argument is not about what the free slave did and what the natives did. I don't want us to go there because naming James Monroe Ordner has nothing to do with the ex-slaves and the natives.
No, it does, because this is like a proxy war. It's like a war by a few Liberians saying, you know what happened? The free slaves that came here were not right thinking. They didn't have the right brain. Feelings to know who are those that were.
It's not few Liberians. I mean, you've been massively among in this opinion pool here that 75% participated. You down by just 24% against 65.3%.
Let Jane wrap up because I don't like for people to take this as American Liberian versus natives.
Yes, exactly. Well, the fact is that this debate is ongoing.
But James Monroe was not an American Liberian. James Monroe is a white man, a slave owner, the president of America. So all of us relate to James Monroe. Our country is named after him. Our capital is named after him. So that's what we are talking about. It's not about natives and non-natives.
Correct. I'm trying to make my closing point anyway. So the point is that there's like a proxy action taken by the proponents of this argument on behalf of people who they may assume were too inferior to make good judgment about whom they thought were good to them or not. Go and look at his writing. Go and look at he was informed. Those people those days could be considered far more educated and informed than those of us today. And they were able to pick between those who were against them and those who were for them. So what ground do we have to come today and say, oh no, you know, I mean, after 200 years, they have died and gone, even though we're not around, we don't know anything, we don't have any good reason, we still think they were wrong to think that those people were good to them. That's not right. So I want to say that because of their relationship, Liberia has benefited deeply. At some point, Liberia used to be near the status of industrial nation. They manufacture ship and steamboats. I was reading in the Congress Library in preparation for this debate. There was a point in time when the balance of trade was $123,000 worth of export of palm oil, beta ball, and others, compared to the import, which are 157,000, giving you a difference of just about 20-something thousand. Today, the deficit, the balance of trade is 260 million compared to $1 billion. We have gone back. We have gone back because we destroyed Monrovia, and we seek to destroy everything that has to do with Monrovia. That's not right. We need to reconcile.
Just Monrovia?
We need to avoid controversy and division. Again, if we say we are changing the name, whose name do we put there? Do we say, okay, we'll use the better name? What becomes of the Bassa people? What becomes of the crew and the global people? What name do we use? Or do we get distracted from the central argument, the central themes of reconciliation under the TRC, political decentralization, so that the few guys in Monrovia cannot keep.
Well, you know the TRC mentioned these symbols and names, but wrap up. Let's close the thing.
All right. So we need to focus on the healthcare and other things and keep Monrovia. Let us go and build Zakipa and do the most we can do about that. Build a place, build mansion, build roads, do anything. Leave Monrovia alone. Monrovia is already destroyed, dilapidated, and it's a rundown area. Leave it alone. Let's go, please. Because other than that, we'll have to change Ashmore Street, Mercury Street, Monrovia, Maryland, Sino, Greenville, Picnic Sets, all other stuff we're doing. That'll be distraction and controversial and very divisive. Thank you very much.
Thank you, James Larsah. Thank you, Mr. Percy Harris. Great conversation, gentlemen. We appreciate, how you articulated to the best of your ability. Mr. Jai.
Let's wrap it up and see us Tuesday for the Hour of Art Politics and also Chemistry and Society. If you think of chemistry, you think of gas, you think of what you use to clean, you think of all these things. So we have a new program coming here on Focus on Liberia called Chemistry and Society. If you were in high school in Liberia and the chemistry taught you thought it was all about Western things, you got to think again, because I know my pan one is chemistry, and we're going to be discussing that right here on Focus on Liberia.
And I know my pan butter is also chemistry.
You are correct.
Bye-bye, folks.
We are Liberia. Liberia is our home. Liberia people. Unity, all we want. Liberia, oh. Unity, all we want. Liberia, Liberia.